It's a dark and stormy night. Thunder rumbles as a mysterious figure enters a museum showcasing the history of the Norse gods. The air is thick with intrigue as the guide captivates visitors with the tale of Loki, the god of mischief, who once created a magical mask. The guide points to a glass display case, explaining that the mask grants its wearer Loki's divine powers. Suddenly, the mysterious man smirks and reveals his true identity. He is Loki himself. With a flick of his hand, chaos ensues. Terrified visitors flee in all directions as Loki smashes the display case. His eyes burn with anticipation, only to find a replica. Enraged, Loki grabs the guide, removes his face with a sinister grin, and plops it back into the display case as a twisted replacement. The museum's security team charges in, but Loki casually fires bullets from his fingers. Miraculously, the bullets miss their targets. Deciding he's had enough, Loki opens a gaping hole in the ground, swallowing the guard's whole. He storms off into the night, his fury fueling his quest to find the real mask. The next morning, in a serene countryside setting, a river carries the real mask downstream until it's snagged by a curious dog named Otis. Not far away, Tim and Tanya are visiting their friends to see their newborn baby. Tanya, caught up in baby fever, presses Tim about starting a family. Tim awkwardly deflects, insisting they're not ready. Back home, Tanya is frustrated by his lack of commitment, and Tim tries to make amends. Otis interrupts the tense moment, proudly presenting the mask he found. Tim dismisses it as junk, unaware of its cosmic significance. Meanwhile, Loki is tracking the mask, driven by his father Odin's stern command to retrieve it before it wreaks havoc on Earth. Later that day, Tim pitches a new animation idea to his boss, Daniel Moss, a high-profile animator. But the pitch bombs, leaving Tim disheartened. That evening, he attempts to cheer Tanya up with a gift and agrees to attend a Halloween party for work, though he lacks a costume. Tanya suggests the mask Otis found. Reluctantly, Tim wears it to the party. At the party, Tim dons the mask, which immediately fuses to his face. He transforms into the mask, an energetic, green-faced being imbued with Loki's mischievous powers. Bursting onto the stage, Tim electrifies the dull event with an outrageous performance that leaves everyone, especially his boss, in awe. By the time he gets home, Tim is still masked and spends an unforgettable, albeit surreal, evening with Tanya. The next morning, Tim wakes up with no memory of the previous night. At work, his boss is ecstatic about Tim's performance, calling it a creative breakthrough. Daniel even offers Tim a pivotal role in a new animation project. Elated, Tim shares the good news with Tanya, only for her to drop a bombshell. She's pregnant. The couple confirms the pregnancy at a doctor's office, where things take an odd turn when Tanya suddenly emits soap bubbles instead of vomiting. Despite the bizarre moment, they move forward with their lives. Months later, Tanya gives birth to a baby boy, Alvi, who inherits Loki's powers from the mask. Meanwhile, Loki, desperate to locate his mask, interrogates a warehouse dealer under Odin's control. Odin reveals that Alvi, the mask-powered child, holds the key to the artifact. Loki sets out to find the boy. At home, Tim searches high and low for the mask, thinking it might inspire his animation project. Unbeknownst to him, Otis has hidden the mask in his new doghouse after being displaced from his old spot by Alvi's nursery. Tanya inflates a balloon for Alvi to play with, only for his head to inflate like the balloon itself. Shocked, she watches as her baby instantly reverts to normal, oblivious to what just happened. Otis, however, witnesses the event and grows jealous of the baby's powers. Elsewhere, Loki infiltrates a hospital, morphing into a bee to intimidate a receptionist. He hacks her computer to find a list of newborns and begins tracking them down. At Tim's house, life becomes chaotic. Alvi's crying keeps Tim and Tanya awake at night. During one sleepless spell, Tim almost gives Alvi a light bulb instead of a bottle. Alvi, using his newfound powers, ensures Tim wakes up in time to avoid disaster. Tanya announces she has to leave for a week-long business trip, leaving Tim alone with Alvi. Frantic, Tim pleads with his boss to let him work from home. The boss agrees, but things spiral out of control. Alvi's relentless crying disrupts Tim's work. In desperation, Tim turns on cartoons for Alvi, ignoring Tanya's strict orders not to use TV as a babysitter. To Tim's relief, the cartoons mesmerize the baby, allowing him a moment of peace. Otis, however, sneaks away to his doghouse, digging frantically for the mask he's hidden. Meanwhile, Loki continues his search. Disguising himself as a salesman, he visits a woman's house and presents her with a vacuum cleaner. When she tests it, Loki cranks the machine to deadly levels, sucking her into oblivion. Disappointed to find her baby is just an ordinary child, Loki storms off, growing increasingly impatient. Back at home, Tim struggles to balance work and parenting. Alvi, showing off his powers, speaks his first word, Mama. Tim tries to get him to say Daddy, but Alvi cheekily repeats Mama in a deep, adult voice, scaring Tim half to death. Tim's mounting frustration peaks as his boss demands progress on the animation project. Exhausted, Tim entrusts Otis to watch over Alvi while he works. Instead, Otis returns to his doghouse, determined to reclaim the mask. As the chaos intensifies, Loki inches closer to discovering the true source of his mask's power. Tim drifts off to sleep on the couch, leaving his young son, Alvi, entranced by cartoons on television. Across the room, Otis, the family dog, quietly observes, the enchanted mask resting temptingly close. With Tim in dreamland and Alvi engrossed in the flickering screen, Otis seizes the opportunity. Grasping the mask, the canine transforms into a maniacal, mischievous version of himself. Meanwhile, Alvi's eyes remain glued to a bizarre cartoon where a man discovers a frog that sings and dances. Attempting to capitalize on the frog's talent, the man shows it to a businessman, but the amphibian acts ordinary. The cartoon ends with the man being committed to a mental institution, a detail lost on Alvi, who finds the cartoon hilarious. Oblivious to Otis's transformation, Alvi giggles at the screen, while Otis, now dominated by the mask's power, schemes to eliminate the boy for good. The sun rises, and Tim, battling a creative block, struggles to come up with ideas for an important work presentation. His frustration deepens as Alvi imitates the frog's dance routine from the cartoon, displaying inexplicable abilities. His face morphs into the likeness of a woodpecker before he starts bouncing off walls with uncanny speed and agility. Stunned, Tim chases Alvi to the kitchen, where he frantically calls emergency services. His attempts to describe his son's bizarre antics, like shape-shifting and superhuman jumps, are met with disbelief, and the operator hangs up on him. Desperate, Tim runs to his neighbor, seeking help. But when he asks Alvi to demonstrate his abilities, the boy behaves like a typical baby, much like the frog in the cartoon. Furious at Tim's insistence, the neighbor throws him out. Returning home, Tim's day worsens. Alvi grabs him by the leg and thrashes him into the furniture. Just as the chaos peaks, Otis, still masked and devious, enters with a rattle for Alvi. The toy is a stick of dynamite disguised as a rattle. Alvi, however, isn't fooled. With a mischievous grin, he extinguishes the fuse, mimics the sound of an explosion with his mouth, and dashes off. Hearing the noise, Otis mistakenly believes Alvi is gone and celebrates, only to be outsmarted moments later. As Otis gnaws on a bone, it too turns out to be a bomb, courtesy of Alvi. The ensuing explosion leaves Otis singed but alive, thanks to the mask's powers. Undeterred, Otis hatches an elaborate plan involving a crane and a plunger to capture Alvi. That evening, Otis sneaks into the house, fully armed and ready to execute his plan. Tim, seeing the armed and transformed dog, faints on the spot. Unbothered, Otis proceeds to Alvi's room, climbing the ceiling with a plunger tied to a rope. Quietly descending, he hooks Alvi's apron to the crane and prepares to activate it. But Alvi, ever the trickster, swaps the hook onto Otis's collar. The dog, oblivious, activates the crane, which yanks him through the house in a series of increasingly absurd mishaps. Otis is dragged through a piano, flung into a ventilation pipe, slammed into a ceiling fan, and launched back into the room. The chaos culminates with Otis being dunked into a vat of dirty water, stuffed into a birdhouse, and finally crushed by a washing machine's drying rollers. Exhausted and battered, Otis concedes defeat. As he flies out of the window, propelled by Alvi's breath like a balloon, the mask leaves him, and he reverts to normal. With the house in shambles, Tim tends to his fatherly duties, changing Alvi's diaper. Suddenly, Loki, the god of mischief, appears at the front door disguised as a delivery man. Handing Tim a package, Loki takes the opportunity to inspect Alvi. But much to his frustration, Alvi acts like an ordinary baby, hiding his powers. As Tim opens the package, a boxing glove springs out, punching him across the room. Loki departs in frustration but stays close, spying on Tim and Alvi. Fearing Alvi might be possessed, Tim loads him into the car and heads for the pediatrician. On the way, Alvi spins his head 360 degrees and spews green goo across the car's interior. Loki, now certain of Alvi's powers, follows them but parks in a disabled spot, drawing the ire of a policeman. With a snap of his fingers, Loki incapacitates the officer, pinning his head to the pavement. He then confronts Tim, demanding the mask. When Tim denies having it, Loki grows furious and brandishes a massive axe. Suddenly, Odin, Loki's father, takes control of a nearby security guard to chastise his son for his failures. In the confusion, Tim escapes with Alvi into an alleyway. Loki, enraged, blocks their path with an iron wall before unleashing a massive grenade from a suitcase. The grenade hurtles toward them, but Alvi transforms his arms into a shield, deflecting the explosion. Tim, filled with pride, finally acknowledges his son's extraordinary powers. The dust settles as Loki realizes the magnitude of Alvi's potential. But the baby's giggles remind everyone, this isn't over yet. Loki, assuming his true form, conjures a gigantic fireball, ready to obliterate everything in his path. Just as he was about to throw it, Odin, the All-Father, suddenly took over Tim's body and unleashed electric rays, disintegrating the fireball and stripping Loki of his divine powers. Alvi, Tim's magically enhanced baby, joined the fray by stretching his tiny arms to comedic proportions and smashing Loki with 2 garbage cans before throwing him into one. The danger seemed to be over. But reality hit hard when Tim received a call from his boss, ordering him to return to work and give a presentation. Tim, with Alvi in tow, rushed back to the office, where the TV producers awaited him. However, with no preparation, Tim was fired on the spot and escorted out of the building. Later, Tim called his wife Tanya, sharing the disastrous events of the day. Despite everything, he admitted he was happy to have spent time with their son. That night, father and son bonded over bath time and fell asleep together. But the peace didn't last. Loki, stripped of his powers but not his determination, broke into their home in the dead of night. In Alvi's room, he inscribed strange runes on the wall and invoked a spell to summon his father, Odin. Loki begged for his powers back, explaining that Alvi was the son of the mask and the source of his troubles. Odin relented, restoring Loki's powers but giving him a strict deadline: 1 hour to recover the mask and undo his chaos. When a nosy neighbor interrupted Loki, he humorously cursed her by turning her head into a giant nose. Meanwhile, Tim woke to find Alvi missing. Loki, using his cunning, disguised himself as Tanya to deceive Tim. He revealed his true identity, laid down his ultimatum: find the mask or never see Alvi again, and then escape through the roof with the baby, leaving behind a trail of destruction. When the real Tanya arrived home, she found the place in shambles. Mistaking her for Loki, Tim attacked her, but he quickly realized his mistake and explained everything. Tanya didn't believe him until the nose-headed neighbor appeared, solidifying Tim's story. United, the couple set off to find Otis, their dog, who had hidden the mask. Meanwhile, Otis had donned the mask himself, indulging in a romantic escapade with a local canine. Tim and Tanya caught up with the mischievous dog, convincing him to give up the mask. With the magical artifact in hand, they raced to rescue Alvi. Loki, meanwhile, was in an alley, humorously playing Wild West games with Alvi. Their showdown escalated into a slapstick duel, with Loki firing a fake gun while Alvi retaliated with a real one. Their antics were interrupted when Tim and Tanya arrived, proposing an exchange: the mask for their son. Loki initially agreed, but predictably betrayed them, deciding to keep Alvi. Otis leaped into action, biting Loki and causing him to drop the mask. In a heroic dive, Tim caught it mid-air and transformed into the mask. What followed was a high-speed chase as Tim, Tanya, and Otis pursued Loki, who used his powers to create a surreal landscape of rising roads and massive waves. Despite Loki's tricks, Tim's new form allowed him to keep up. The chase ended at a boxing stadium, where Loki challenged Tim to a showdown. The two engaged in a chaotic battle, blending punches with magical powers. Loki, with his divine experience, temporarily gained the upper hand, but Tim fought back, trapping Loki in a suitcase and hurling it into the sea. Reuniting with Tanya, Tim found Alvi locked in a cell. As they tried to escape, Loki summoned a giant pencil, transforming it into a brick wall to block their path. Tim retaliated with various gambling-themed weapons, but Loki turned them into harmless flowers. In a final move, Loki attacked with the pencil, only for Tim to shred it using a sharpener. Despite his efforts, the pencil reassembled, and Loki emerged, ready for more mischief. Loki proposed a twisted solution: let Alvi choose who he wanted to be with. Using games and tricks, Loki tried to lure the boy to his side. Tim, however, removed his mask and spoke from the heart, telling Alvi how proud he was to be his father and how the boy had made him a better man. Moved, Alvi chose his family, calling Tim Daddy for the first time. Furious, Loki summoned a massive hammer to crush them. Tim, using all his strength, managed to lift the hammer, only for Loki to activate drills on its head. Just as all hope seemed lost, Odin appeared, announcing that Loki's time was up. Though ready to punish his son, Odin was moved by Tim's plea for forgiveness, stating that forgiveness is a father's duty. Touched, Odin forgave Loki and took him back to Asgard, removing the mask to prevent further chaos. In the aftermath, Tim pitched a new idea to his former boss, a cartoon based on his adventures with Alvi. The idea was a hit, and the show became a massive success. On opening night, the family celebrated, and Tanya announced she was pregnant again, bringing joy to Tim and Alvi. The family had faced gods, chaos, and destruction, but in the end, love, laughter, and resilience triumphed. And that's a wrap on Son of the Mask, a wild ride of chaos, comedy, and heartfelt moments where even gods can't compete with the power of family. From Loki's mischief to Alvi's unexpected heroics, this sequel had its share of madness and magic. What did you think of this quirky adventure? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. For more action-packed, hilarious, and unpredictable movie recaps, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell.